Welcome to Breaking Down Bergman. I'm David Friend.
I'm Sonia Strimban.
And today we're looking at The Magician.
Ja, det var en ganska lustig lek.
Hur menar du, käraste?
Det är väl lustigt att förödmjuka människor som inte kan försvara sig.
Du förstår inte det här, mitt barn. Medicinalrådet och jag har slagit vad i en fråga av stort vetenskapligt intresse.
Slagit vad?
Ja, visst, Bergman. Er make förfäktar den uppfattningen att det verkligen existerar krafter som är ogripbara eller oförklarliga.
Och ni förnekar den möjligheten?
Det vore en katastrof om vetenskapen tvangs acceptera det oförklarliga.
En grotesk tanke.
Det skulle leda till att vi fick räkna med att vi plötsligt kunde tvingas att, logiskt sett fick vi tänka oss...
En gud.
En gud, om ni så vill.
Fullkomligt omodernt. Vetenskapen står idag bättre rustad än någonsin för att genomtränga alla skenbara mysterier.
Skenbara?
Allt kan förklaras.
Du förefaller mig mycket optimistisk.
Hot off the heels of several successes, Ingmar Bergman had created The Seventh Seal, which was a hit with critics, and Wild Strawberries, which also was a hit with audiences. And he decided to do The Magician, a decidedly darker take on his themes.
Visually darker, maybe thematically not as much as something like The Seventh Seal, but there's similarities to films like Sawdust and Tinsel and even to Joy, where he was really exploring the role of the actor, the performer, and in general the artist, the creator.
And I think what's really interesting here is that he looks at all of those themes as he did before, but he really takes it to another level and raises questions about truths and deception. What is a reality? What is a fiction? What is part of the imagination? And poses that question to the audience in a way that he didn't in the other movies.
Yeah, he's almost, I feel like he's challenging people to really look at their own role in the spectacle. So are you creating the spectacle? Are you watching the spectacle? How much contribution are you supposed to make to the entire production, even if you're just an audience member? Like, are you responsible for suspending enough belief to make that fiction hover somewhere between non-fiction and reality?
The setting where the film takes place really encapsulates the themes of the movie. It's 1846, a time when people are just distracted by the world of magic and all of the questions that it opens up.
It's not just a fascination with magic. There's still that blurry line between science and magic in a way. And as science becomes more of a hardened study and people are realizing truths about the universe, about chemistry, about biology, then that whole fascination and superstition and magic and all those other worldly things starts to fade. But he really takes us in this film to that kind of tension that happens during the Enlightenment when science is really starting to take the foreground and these kind of performative tricks are really going into the background and are becoming disrespected, which is complicated for people who are performers. I think that maybe what Bergman is trying to show us in this film is a realm where these two juxtapositions can actually coexist. So you can have fiction and you can have reality. They don't need to cancel each other out. You can have magic and you can have science. But what happens in this film is that it's not a smooth transition to get those things peacefully cohabitating in the same set. And what he's showing us in the film, basically, like in other movies like Sawdust and Tinsel, is you have a traveling troupe of performers. In this case, they're a magician and his assistants. And they're going from city to city, and they're not part of that day-to-day society.
And in the case of this film, the authoritative characters.
Yeah, so to explain, Vogler, the main magician, he has gotten a reputation and notoriety for being effective. And there is a question that's raised in the film, and we don't ever really fully get the entire answer, whether he actually has some type of supernatural ability or whether he's just really clever and, is a bit of a hypnotist type thing. And so when he is nearing the town, he is stopped by the magistrate, the police officer, and a doctor.
Kind of sounds like the start of a joke, but...
They want to preview the show that he's going to put on in the town in order to make sure that there's nothing very disruptive and that won't, disturb the population, basically. And so they're arrested or detained in the magistrate's house and have to show all their tricks and their wares.
And Bergman's touched on this a few times in his other films, but the characters that are authoritative in the structure of society always get a little bit of criticism from Bergman. We saw it in Sawdust and Tinsel during a very brief scene where they head into the town and end up having a run-in with authorities. But here he's laid them out.
Yeah, they are a little bit buffoonish, and I don't want to say simple-minded, but they kind of take things in a very black and white way. They have no imagination, and I think that's really what Bergman is condemning them for the most. I think the reason that he's so attached to performers, actors, you know, any type of artist is for their ability to draw inspiration from the world, to have imagination, and to interact with people and life in a different way than someone like a magistrate or a police officer can. So they're very short-sighted, they're very black and white. They speak in the name of science and the law and, you know, medicine, and they want to uncover truths. So that's why they make the magician unveil how he does his tricks, and then they mock him for some of them. But they're not really doing it the way that Bergman would want them to, which is, you know, in the pursuit of a noble truth, or in the pursuit of noble science, for example. They're doing it more out of an anxiety, because they're a little bit afraid that what if it's true? What if he has supernatural powers? What if he can control us? What if his magnets are that powerful that they can alter our reality in some way?
I think in some sense this is where we disagreed a bit, because I saw some connections here between Bergman discussing religion in a lot of his past films and addressing all of the questions that arise from that, and presenting them here in a way. There's the example of the scene where a woman is talking to Vogler about her daughter who is dead, and she wants answers from him. She wants some sort of connection, and in the way that I saw it, she viewed him as some sort of religious figure who could connect in some way with her deceased daughter. But I guess you could take that in another way and say, well, maybe she saw him as some sort of fortune teller touching with the afterlife. But there are a lot of themes of religion that I found in the film. The authoritative figures, they don't totally disbelieve in the magic, because in some ways they fear what might be the truth. And that truth could be that the magic is real. And that reminds me of religion.
I don't think that in this film he's picking up the religious discourse the same way that he did in The Seventh Seal. And even Wild Strawberries. When he does that, he's a lot more obvious.
You could be right, but it's also difficult to really pin it down, because if he is addressing religion, it's diluted by all of the other concepts that are in the film.
I think there's interesting, quirky things in this film. Overall, I find it a little bit challenging to talk about, because I didn't think that it was as strong as the ones that came before it. And even as we were watching it, I was struggling to kind of understand what he's trying to do. And I'm not sure, like with the other films, when we read about what's going on in his life, we found very clear connections about his own personal anxieties and the things that he struggled with and what he was trying to express in film. With the magician, it's almost like he's making some kind of statements about his industry. That's what I heard. So for example, the film opens up with a traveling troupe going down the road, and then they find this man who they think might be dead on the side of the road in the bushes. Turns out he's just some drunk, dilapidated former actor who's on death's door. And they take him in basically just to get him to the next town. So he ends up being a very interesting character, because he's kind of like the parallel to the magician. The magician is a performer, and this man used to be a performer, and they face off. What's interesting about this character is that he reveals certain truths about deception. He speaks about his own profession as an actor as basically our harbinger of deceit, you know? And then he becomes a literal substitute for the magician once he dies, and he is mistaken for the corpse of Vogler, who then the physician ends up dissecting to really find out if he's a man and what he died of, etc.
And this is really the thematic spin that Bergman puts on the audience, because we are sort of fooled into believing the deceit that is happening with some of the characters on the screen. When that dissection takes place, we don't really know who's dead at that point. We don't know who is under that blanket until it's revealed a little bit later that Vogler is not dead.
It becomes really tricky. They're almost interchangeable. And I don't know whether, you know, Bergman is making a commentary about how dispensable actors might be or how they're viewed, and how we just really, to use your terminology, put faith in the entire performance. There's some things in this film that I find challenging to believe that they can work. So with the example of the dissection, you have a trained physician who is dissecting a corpse, and he can't tell the identity, that it's not the man that he's been looking at for the past 2 days. Like,
yeah,
that's
exactly.
weird to me.
It was confusing when we watched it, I think, and we had a lot of trouble believing it as it happened, but I also feel that that is the trick that Bergman played on us, because we bought into the entire production up until this point, and in a sort of a wink and a nod to the craft, he spun it around on us, and we still went along with it. We sort of shrugged that moment off and continued along with the story.
But
Bergman was playing with us. That's really.
I guess, but there's a few awkward moments like that in the film. Like, for example, when it's revealed that the magician's assistant, who up until this point we think is a young man, turns out to be not only a woman, but the magician's wife. That was a very awkward reveal. There was no subtlety about that. Or like the ending of the movie, where it's all dark and gloomy and rainy all throughout the film, and then literally within a split second it turns to sunshine and they ride off happily because they can now perform in front of the king.
It's jarring.
Yeah, the finesse is gone, and I don't know whether he's doing it intentionally or he just...
I think it's intentionally, and I think it's one of those things that doesn't work. And some of... I like the film, but it reminded me of older Bergman in the sense that doesn't feel like he did it the right way. He wasn't fully successful, and it's the same way that we saw him, early on pushing with those themes. He really wanted to have a message that he was telling people, and here he is trying to, make a more complex message, and it's interesting and it's a nice experiment, but I don't know if it's, his proudest moment.
Especially after, something like Wild Strawberries, that was so highly enjoyable and well done.
That's really what it comes down to. I mean, previously we saw Brink of Life, and we were a little bit disappointed by that, and I think we're partly let down by the fact that he had several consecutive successes that were just very solid. And Brink of Life didn't live up to those expectations, and The Magician doesn't live up to it. It's still successful and better than Brink of Life, in my opinion. But we know how you feel.
I think we all know what I think.
But, it's not as perfect. It's just good.
Yeah. I mean, it does there's some interesting tricks that he does, like with the mirrors, how previously mirrors have always been like a symbol for truth or truth-seeking, whereas here they're used as an instrument for further deception and trickery. The masking and unmasking, the parallelism of characters, like there's a lot in there.
It's cluttered.
Or the androgyny. Yeah, you're right. It's cluttered, and you can't quite distill what is it that he's trying to tell us. What am I supposed to walk away with?
But also, it's interesting. It's interesting to talk about, and I think we chatted about this for quite a bit afterwards. So,
chatted, complained.
Yeah, you more complaining. I guess the question is, essential Bergman?
No.
No. I don't think so. It's a great conversation piece, but more so because it's quirky, and less so because it's perfect.
Yeah, and I also feel like it's not particularly unique. Like, I understand that Bergman is trying to say something, but this trope of magic, performance, fiction, reality, artist, I feel like it's been done before. Just off the top of my head, two more recent films that I can think of are The Illusionist and The Prestige.
Those are both really good films.
Yeah, but I just think that it's kind of a replay of all of these tropes, and there's even the same kind of mood and atmosphere.
Well, thanks for watching Breaking Down Bergman, and don't forget to like us on Facebook and subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next time on Breaking Down Bergman.